Canada, in British Columbia, and myself on the Syilx traditional territory. And we acknowledge that. And thank you very much for allowing us to be here. BCLSS is a nonprofit society dedicated to the preservation and protection of BC lakes. We love our lakes, and we have so many members that are part of lakes, live on lakes throughout the country and monitor them. We're an affiliate of the North American Lake Management Society, NOLMS, and we have over 2,500 provincial members, which is great. And we include the programs. We include a monitoring program where we assist people who want to monitor the lakes with a monitoring program that's set up with different types of modules where they follow the specific guidelines, and that data is then used to create lake reports. And part of that is also we train lake keepers. So Lake Keepers program has a manuals very similar to Stream Keepers. So it's a very nice standardized program that people can get trained on. We train people each year, and some of our directors are trainers. And we have the BC Lake Stewardship Engagement Initiative, which I'm not overly familiar with, but please take a look at our website and you'll see what it's about. Our mission is to act as a resource, communication, and information network among scientists, environmental professionals, First Nations, lakeshore residents, government agencies, and the general public in order to preserve, protect, and restore lakes in British Columbia. Mainly just for future generations. We want to see our lakes healthy and beautiful like they are now. We're very lucky to have them. So that's our mission. We're going to start off with our first speaker, who will be Heather Loratt. Heather is a registered professional biologist living here in West Kelowna, where she's been practicing for a long time, like myself, even longer, and is a limnologist and lake restoration specialist in algae blooms. You want to know about algae blooms, how to address them, call Heather. Heather Loratt Consulting has been around and is very busy in lots of different areas. And she's going to talk to you today about impacts of boats on water intakes and what they found from some of the modeling. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thanks, Daryl.
You're welcome.
I think you might have to unshare your screen. And I'll share mine. Is that working for everyone?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Well, thank you for allowing us to come and present here. I chose this image because lakes are complex and they're embedded in landscapes, and boating becomes part of that complex narrative and part of the complex aquatic systems. To say the least, boats have changed and they are ever more impressive with ever more impressive wakes. Sorry, but it's not just the surface wave that we see with traveling along the top of the lake that's of greatest concern to me. It's also what we would call prop wash, or the downward pointing jet from a wake surf boat, because it plows through the water unlike a water ski boat, and it creates a turbid jet that can move a flow of turbid water towards intakes, and this can happen at considerable distance. Okay. We're not the only ones to notice this. This article showed up in the May 2021, which is just a little ahead of schedule. And it lands on the concept of keeping wake surf boats 200 feet from shore. It's an American publication, so 60 meters. Also, speed limits are proposed, but I would argue that both of those are not as good as proposing that wake surf boats stay in deep water. So you judge where to go, not by distance from shore or by speed, because these boats don't travel quickly, as we probably all know. And I feel that one of the issues we've got with these boats is the operators can be functioning with $500,000 worth of entitlement. A wave is not a wave by any other name. And you will hear this argument by wake surf enthusiasts that wind waves can be just as strong. Well, actually, that's not quite true. First of all, wind waves occur on experienced shorelines. In other words, especially in British Columbia, the valleys funnel the winds. So they don't tend to cause turbidity plumes. But wake surf waves are larger, they're closer together, so they strike the shoreline with more energy and they strike every direction. So it's inexperienced shorelines as well, and they're likely to create turbidity plumes. More on that later. And another argument can be, but there won't be much lake left for me to play in. Well, that's true. If a lake is very shallow, shallower than 8 meters or less, I would suggest that that lake is best left alone. Just due to accelerated eutrophication, if nothing else, and there is other concerns. What you see in the image on the left here is where the safe boating would be in Kalamalka Lake and to the top and Wood Lake to the bottom. And you can see that the safe zone for wake surf boating in Cal Lake includes the vast majority of the lake, a little less so in Wood Lake, which is shallower. There's a whole range of issues that wake surf boats in particular can contribute to. I'm going to pick on them a little bit because they are definitely the largest impact of all of our types of boats. And there can be, and this is what alerted us to this in the first place, there can be incidents of impaired water quality arriving at intakes. So I'm going to back up now and set the context. It's not just that we have these wake surf boats, but that there's other issues going on that the wake surf boats can impact. For example, this is an image on the left of Coldstream Creek entering Kalamalka Lake. You can see quite the turbid plume there. And I'll be showing you a video of that towards the end of this presentation. That plume is annual. Some years are much worse than others. And it's coming because there's a lot of activity on Coldstream Creek and a very poor riparian protection zone throughout the length of Coldstream Creek. There's a lot of cattle ranching, urban development, you name it. The image on the right is from Sentinel Hub, which I strongly recommend you all get involved with. It's free. It's from the European Space Agency. And if you can see my cursor, you can see how much of Cal Lake in 2020 was affected by the plume, the surface plume coming from Coldstream Creek. It's over half of the lake. This also happens to be the year that Cal Lake had a massive cyanobacteria bloom in the fall, the first one in over 20 years. And we've been monitoring for 20 years. This is what you're seeing in this image is the buoyant overflow. Sediments store contaminants. The water column above may actually be meeting all guidelines where the sediments do not. The good news is that even though these sediments can be contaminated from materials being brought in by the stormwater, once they're buried by about 5 centimeters of sediment, they're no longer impacting. That's unfortunately where wake surf boats come in. And that is if they disturb that, then our boundary between what the depth of sediment is that can still affect the water column becomes expanded again. So what are we going to do about it? Well, as with most of these problems, it is going to take a multi-pronged approach. First of all, I would suggest that we need to minimize stormwater contaminants, and that affects all of us that are living in urban areas, to minimize what's going into that stormwater because it's very difficult to treat. It comes in sharp, flashy flows, and that becomes challenging for any form of treatment. Watershed protection is essential, and a spoiler alert, OBWB, Okanagan Basin Water Board, will be releasing an online source water protection toolkit in 2021, so you want to be watching for that. Marinas are consistently the most contaminated substrates and water that we find in a lake, and you want to think about where they are located versus where intake protection zones are. And I would suggest too that we need to make respectful boating easy with guidance, information. I would say that at this point, legislating would be a last resort. So my one-stop solution to all of this is that I invite the power boats, especially the wake surf boats, to transit no wake to 8-meter depth of water and then go play there. So when we debated how to go about proving this with science, we wanted to actually go for something that could be seen. So what we did was we put out instruments every meter for an 8-meter transect. We thought for sure by 8 meters we wouldn't be seeing an effect when we designed this study. We put out recording instruments at each one. Then we deployed underwater drones and aerial drones. It's an aerial drone image you're looking at here. And we wanted to show decision makers what we were actually seeing. What was the impact of that vertical jet of these wake surf boats on the deep sediments? So this image here shows you what a water ski boat will do. There's a small initial plume that you can see developing here, which gradually expands. If you had dozens and dozens of boats starting off in the same day, you would feel the effect of that in the water chemistry. But contrast those images with the exact same thing from a wake surf boat in the same location. And you see the difference in the impact here. This becomes significant even only if 1 or 2 boats are traveling. So it's another order of magnitude. We generated an entire video showing this study, and it is available to you through BCLSS. It was first aired at one of your conventions 2 years ago, and you can ask BCLSS for it and the one that will be ending this presentation. What you're seeing here is the disturbance caused by the surface waves that everybody is concerned about when they crash into their dock. But you're also seeing the impact of that vertical jet on the substrates. Incidentally, this is my crew here in this little boat. We've had to upgrade to a larger boat because it simply isn't safe with the number of wake surf boats on the lakes these days. We've been almost swamped more than once. This is what this stretch of Kalamalka Lake looked like after we'd done a number of passes of trial with a wake surf boat. The intake for this part of the lake is way over here, almost a kilometer away. And within 12 hours, they had a turbidity event at their intake, courtesy of this one trial. So you can imagine, you know, on a sunny long weekend, the turbidity spikes they get are actually from wake surf boats. And these are very fine, silty substrates. So I would suggest to you that wherever you have wake surf boating on a lake that has a silty substrate, you are going to have turbid flows that are going to be traveling. This is this overflow that you can see from the surface, but there's a whole lot going on underneath that isn't visible from this surface. And it does in fact happen. These dark marks are takeoffs of boats in this region of the lake. And here's one of our takeoffs right here. So what to do about this? We want to conclude that wake surf boating and power boating in general should transit slowly until they're in 8 meters of water. And the reverse should be true for paddlecraft. I don't know if you noticed, but in the one image from the Cottage magazine, the operator of the boat is actually watching the skier. He's not watching where he's going. So this is an issue as well. Anyway, we feel that if we would abide by 8 meters, that should protect most lakes, even those with silty substrates. And it should protect paddlecraft. It should also protect environmental values such as waterfowl nesting in the shallow waters. Also, it will protect against erosion, which is not by any means a trivial issue. How to go about this? Well, we've gathered a number of selections from doing these presentations. Signage with lots of graphics, some humor involved, volunteers that serve coffee while they talk about it at boat launches, Here's one of my personal favorites. That is putting an intake protection zone. That's a measured zone of protection around an intake, so that when a proposal for something like a marina comes forward, it actually triggers that concern. And the intake protection zone can be put into the official community plan, or OCP. We're certainly very open to your ideas about this. You can ask Regional District North Okanagan for these posters if you would like to take some ideas from here on education. I think the first idea here is to get 80% of the safe, sane boaters on your side. Industry knows the risks of wake surf boating and actually wants to avoid lake closures. So interestingly enough, they do encourage smart wake surf boating. And I guarantee there's going to be no appetite for bans over the next few years. The industry does recommend 8 meters. Interestingly enough, they ended up at exact the same depth as us. And their argument to boaters is 8 meters will ensure that you have the most beautiful wave possible for your wake surfing. The reason for that is because that wake wave is not touching the bottom of the lake. So it has a more perfect shape. So who knew they would actually be on our side? Next, I want to give you just a part of a video, which will also be available to you in its entirety from BC LSS. And this video shows what will actually happen when you have a turbid plume enter a lake and the kind of travel that will follow. Storm flows are yet another thing that can affect lakes. As a creek or storm flow enters the lake, it will plunge into the water layer that matches its density. As this plume travels into the lake, suspended materials settle out, and the plume density decreases, which changes its position in the water column. The inflow plume can flow into one water layer or split into a mix of buoyant overflow that travels on the lake surface, interflow that travels into the metalimnion or thermocline layer, or dense underflow that travels along the lake bottom. These plumes are also affected by seiches, and all of this will affect an intake. We hope you enjoy watching this video of the water movements hidden beneath every lake surface. So my point in showing this video is that that creamy turbid layer is traveling back and forth in the lake, being pushed around by seiches and other inflows. So it's not a trivial thing when we create these turbid plumes. It can be very, very difficult for a water sampler to actually accurately measure this. It's a moving target. So obviously the solution is don't have this happen in the first place. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. We do have a couple questions in the chat here. I think we have a bit of time. So one of them is, would you consider establishing wakeboard zones identified with markers and positioned by GPS coordinates based on depth and distance from shore?
That's a good question. And I would not put out markers. In most of the navigable lakes, you need permission from DFO for navigable markers. What we're trying to develop is actually an app, because a lot of these folks have their phones on board because they're surgically attached to them. And what we want to be able to do is show them where it is so that it can actually go into their navigation system. So I would avoid putting out buoys, but I would want to inform people that are keen not to wreck the lake they're playing in.
Okay, thank you. The second question, Wassa is a tiny, shallow, soft bottom kettle lake currently being destroyed by many wake and motorboats. Do you have information on this type of lake to share with us?
I can put you in touch with a lake in Alberta that I've been working with developing signage. They're also a very shallow lake and it was being absolutely destroyed. I don't know what you mean by destroyed in their case. The amount of sediment disturbance was eutrophying the lake at an unusual rate, and they ended up with very heavy toxic cyanobacteria blooms, which actually will make the wake surfers sick as well. But of course, not everybody can see those two things as being more than just correlated, that they're causal. So I think we're going to need more work on it, but definitely the science is telling this story. If a lake is shallower than 8 meters, I would say we should follow the US's lead, and that lake should be closed for wake surfing. And oh boy, hopefully you can get most people to just cooperate, because that's going to be very difficult to achieve.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question. From Kelly, what is buoyant overflow in relation to your slide showing algae bloom?
Good question. The buoyant overflow is whenever you have an inflow into a lake, it won't just travel at the surface of the lake. It will find where it matches the density of the water column it's flowing into. So overflow means it's more buoyant than the lake that's receiving it. Interflow means it's somewhere in the middle of the water column. And if it's denser, which it often is in the spring in most of our creeks, because it's much colder and that increases water density. If it's denser, then it's going to travel along the bottom of the lake. So when you get a turbidity plume caused by a wake surf boat, it's at the same temperature as the water it's in. So it will be more dense and it will flow along the bottom of the lake. And that guess where we put lake intakes.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Heather. I know there's some other questions coming up in the chat, and we should have some more time at the end to get to those questions. Now, Daryl Arsenault is going to speak. He is a BCLSS director, and he's operator of Arsenault Environmental Consulting. Daryl.
Hello, everybody. Again. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, so today I just wanted to share with you some options for protecting our shorelines and greening up the shorelines to make them more resilient to flooding, make them resilient to boat wakes, make them biodiverse, provide habitat, just to be the lake shores that they are before we alter them. So there are a lot of opportunities to restore the lakes, those shoreline segments, back to where they were, or even hopefully never change them, maybe have the opportunity to protect them. So this first slide is really showing you a really bad example, an example of a house that was built right at the lake shore with retaining walls. The shore actually was a little further out at one point in time, but with the energy of those retaining walls reflecting and diffracting, it causes changes to the nearshore sediment transport and moves the sediment away from shore. And then eventually you end up with potentially failing retaining walls. And in this case, I've been retained by this property owner to come up with a plan to remove at least a portion of this retaining wall. They can't remove it all, or they'd have to remove their house. So the part, and I'll talk about that later on the presentation. So Green Shores for Homes, I just wanted to take that opportunity to mention this. This is a program that's been developed really in the state of Washington, and it's been adopted by the Stewardship Center of British Columbia. And you might be familiar with the Stewardship Center. It's been around for a long time. They've shared access management, planning, greening, stream shores, just a huge diversity of stewardship initiatives that you can go there to look up their resources. So I encourage you to go to the Stewardship Center to look up the Green Shores program and satisfy your curiosity by looking at some of the other things. Green Shores for Homes is about protecting your property and helping the environment. So it's instead of having what you see on the left side of the screen, where it's scouring, protecting, having a fill in front of the house with your green lawn, and what happens is your wall will, whether it's riprap wall or concrete wall or gabion basket wall, they all act the same. They deflect energy and they don't allow it to be absorbed to the shoreline. When you look at the right side where energy is absorbed, plants are there, more fish, more food, more diversity, more connection between the upland and the lake. So that's kind of what it's all about, is just really maintaining that connection. You can either walk up to your retaining wall, look over the edge and say, oh, the lake looks nice. Or look from your house and say, the lake looks nice, I can see no trees. Or you can have some integration. And that's what we're talking about here. We're adding sand back in and gravels and vegetation to absorb those wave energy. And this is supported by many organizations, including Natural Resource Canada. So this is an interesting brochure that they offer, the Green Shores program offers, and it's showing an example on the left of our typical walls and lawns and, full 180-degree view of the lake. And on the right side, you see more integrated with the shoreline, more of an ocean shot. So it's used for oceans as well as lakes. And really an important part of this is just making sure that you can actually become certified in this program and get points for property. You can become, so that same property we looked at on here is shown on this next slide, where you see a shoreline that has plants, pathways, seating areas, a gravel beach, a place that you can come and look and see wildlife and enjoy it still, but it's also no maintenance. You don't have to cut your lawn. It's a fantastic thing. And you're going to prevent pollution from going in the lake. It's going to add beauty, demonstrate leadership of the Green Shores program, financial benefits from lack of maintenance, and sometimes reduce permit fees and tax incentives, which we're hoping is moving. In some areas, it does that. And it's, of course, prevents that cumulative assessment runoff. And cumulative impacts really are 1,000 cuts on the shoreline, where you all have everybody putting retaining walls and green lawns right to the edge. Geese are on there every day, mowing your grass for you and leaving their presence. Instead, you can have something where really you're more integrated into the environment and part of it. So how does certification work? You become certified by having somebody like, I guess I'm certified to do an assessment of your property, and we have a number of people throughout the province come in and say, yes, if you added so many pieces of large woody debris and you had a dock that connects properly and doesn't shade out, you haven't ruined fish habitat, you've got a certain amount of natural recurring vegetation and no retaining walls, you can get a higher points level and get to the point where you can actually become certified, and you put the little sign up on your front yard or your backyard. So I was going to show you a few examples of how Green Shores works and what can be done to have something that isn't a retaining wall system, isn't what we've traditionally seen, which we know it isn't working. We know that all of this bouncing of energy is transferring sometimes your problem onto the next person down the way. Whether in the winter it might be the person to the north, and in the summer it might be the person to the south, or back, or vice versa. So this slide here should show you the traditional erosion control, or Green Shores, before on the left and after on the right. This is a great example because this is a place that is no longer going to be a home for people. It's going to be wine viewing. So they're only doing wine viewings and tastings on the top floor. So they really aren't concerned about the lower floor and the views from that floor. So we're able to revegetate the shoreline and with hugelkultur. I want to get into that a little bit. Hugelkultur is a use of rotting wood as a base for plant growth and rooting. So here's the example. In 2018, I went there and the shoreline was like this: weeds, grass, riprap, erosion along the top, cracking in the lawn. Some of the structures they had up there, like planting boxes and stairs, were failing. So luckily, we convinced these guys under the riparian assessment component to restore this with this Green Shores idea. So if you look at the left and the right, we have tree trunks in there in 2020, native plants growing quite well, some gravel in there for shoreline protection and weed suppression. So I'll give you an idea how this works. Is you rip all that stuff off. Riprap's gone. Reduce the grade, if at all possible. Take it back into the lawn. Reduce the grade to 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 if you can. And then use something like logs or to create that infrastructure, like rebar in concrete. So basically, logs are going to act to stabilize the soil, and as plant roots get in there and the logs start to rot, you'll get even better growth. Sometimes you need to ballast those rocks and be prepared for erosion. So anchoring them in place with, and I'll show you some examples of that later. I don't know if you ever heard of hugelkultur before, but it's a German term for, like as I mentioned, using wood as your base as it rots. Nutrition, and basically captures also and retains moisture. Next thing you do is you make it rough and loose, fill it with soil, keep that soil loose, add in your native plants, which you see on the side here, on the next side, and wait for it to grow. Important part in this region and many others is to add water. You have to have a good watering program. You can't just build it and walk away. Maintenance is always required. In this case, you see we got the native plants in there, some red osier dogwood and Douglas maple and Oregon grape. And next thing you know, I see a gopher snake move in. The same one that I'd seen about 10 years earlier at the same site. Interesting fact, gopher snakes are the largest snake we have in BC, and they go up to 2 meters long, and they eat rattlesnakes and other snakes. But they look like a rattlesnake, so don't get them confused. The end result, again, there's some other examples here. You have to plan for people to access the shore, manage the access. So there's a trail over on the far right there, and a little viewing platform where they have the wine tasting area outside. I may have to get some water. Here's another example of riprap removal. And remember, riprap, even though it looks terrible and is somewhat functional, especially when it's at low gradient, provides habitat. In this case, these people had rattlesnakes hanging around quite a bit, and they found they were spending all their time in this riprap. And riprap was put there because of the big flood event in 2017, where we found that it started to undermine the concrete slab that was built too close to the lake, which usually happens. But the riprap provides habitat for insects, arachnids, spiders, which then attract snakes and lizards, and rodents, and amphibians. So it's habitat. So if you're ever doing this, remember, check that riprap out. Hire a qualified professional, because we found in the same riprap area blue-tailed skinks, which are a blue-listed species in BC, as well as gopher snakes. That last one you just saw. And we didn't find any rattlesnakes, even though people were worried about it. Important thing about replacing riprap or walls with large woody debris, which is a very important part of the shoreline, we tend to remove it and burn it, is you have to anchor it appropriately. For a very large boomstick like was used in this project, the buoyant force is about 4,000 kilograms, which you imagine you have to do to, 4,000 pounds for a 60 centimeter by 14 meter long boomstick. Hard to find, but we're lucky because the mills closed down here recently, and we have them for sale. This is a way to try and make it look natural. Imagine Long Beach or any other beach has wood on it. Excuse me. So here, before we have the before riprap and those stakes showing high water mark. So all this work is done above high water mark, and the logs coming in at the end. Work is still ongoing at the site. Native shrubs will be planted this spring, putting in more large woody debris to make sure it's a longer, more gradual gradient. Here's example 3. Now this one is a green shore restoration project in the South Okanagan, near that area. It was a large house construction project, which turned out to, end up with the shore squashed in place, even though it was in very bad shape before they started the house. As kind of an afterthought. Now that's what happens when it takes 7 years to build a house. So there was an engineering fix for it, which was creating a large berm in the lake to offset this shore. The provincial government said, no, we won't let you put fill in the lake. So my idea was to use that rock toe that they were able to put in. I'll show you in the next picture, and reduce the slope and create a green shores technique with lots of wood anchored into soft soils with rock. So here's what we saw before and after. It's quite a bit more attractive. Some people would say maybe not so attractive because it isn't a green grassy lawn area, and it doesn't have any plants yet, but that's just because they didn't have any water at this site. Water's been installed this last winter. You see the plants installed this spring. The log you see, the stump you see coming up on the right side is actually a huge root wad buried into the ground with the stump up, so it will break down for that, provide that hugelkultur approach. The main thing, again, as I say, is that these things need water in the Okanagan and certainly a lot of other drier places in BC. So they started off with a riprap toe that they got permission to put in, and then I came in place and helped with the design, something that's a little bit more attractive. And I think that's great. Eventually, it's going to, so it's before again and after from the lake. And this spring, and we're finding on the far side, on the far right-hand side of this picture, that the erosion occurred because we couldn't get any plants in there for a number of years. So late 2019, this was done in spring of 2019. We're waiting for the water, waiting for the plants. Here we are in 2021. We had another high water event in 2018, and it washed out some of that lower material. So we're going back in to fix it starting yesterday. They floated logs in. So that's the end of it that eroded out. More logs replaced, this time anchored instead of just using the anchoring force of large rocks. They'll be anchored into the ground with plates and rods. Here's another example of a shoreline in a Soyuz where somebody came in and placed a bunch of rocks on the shoreline. A neighbor complained and they were told they had to remove it, come up, do a condition assessment by a qualified professional. And my idea was to remove those rocks, slope it back as much as possible, move the rock wall back to the stream side protection enhancement area that's behind the, in this case, 25 meters from the lake, to delineate that area that they need to maintain as a riparian zone. So there's we reduced it to a 2-to-1 slope, so it didn't deflect the wave energy, and maybe the neighbors wanted to do a similar thing. So we left things like stair structures in there and some of the rock to armor it, some of it put back out in the lake to provide that habitat diversity. And I found logs cabled in there and different things that were in place. I thought I'd just leave those in place, let them break down over time. You can see a log in the forefront of that lower photo. So somebody did some right things at one point in time, but someone said, hey, you're going to get erosion, throw some more rock in there, and they did that. They got in trouble. The important part here is really to have a natural riparian restoration, and it can replace lawns and typical treatments of riparian areas. You can plan for access management. So you can see the picture on the left was before with weeds and some trees at the shoreline that they left. And so we planned, well, why don't you just plan, they're allowed under R to have a 1.5 meter path, so a 1.5 meter garden path with a couple of sitting areas, a play area for kids, all native plants placed into that zone. and the rock line at the 25-meter zone. So when someone comes in and builds their house, they now know you can't touch that area. You can't put lawn in there. You can't put your fill in that area. A retaining wall to keep it in place. It's fine for the future. So I think I'm just about done with my time. Right now we're looking at that failing retaining wall and what are the options for that. They're very similar to what we saw before, and that is placing large woody debris, anchoring in place, and placing large or natural plants behind that, and putting on a maintenance program so they last into time. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. I don't think we have any specific questions for Daryl, so we will just keep moving along. Alan Drinkwater with the Decibel Coalition is with us to talk about working to create boating decibel limits.
Thank you very much, Don. Good morning. During 2020, my wife and I spent March through October at our cabin on the Shuswap Lake. And during that period, I became acutely aware of excessively noisy motorboats. You know, there's about 9,000 motorized craft on Shuswap, but there's about 24 of these excessively noisy boats that create a huge disruption for the many thousands of residents, swimmers, beachgoers, boaters, tourists who come to the Shuswap area to enjoy the lake. And given the solid economic growth we've had since the 2012 recession, there's been a proliferation of these high-powered, high-performance boats across the country. Now, let's be clear about the type of offending boat that we're focused on. These are what you would call high-performance, high-powered boats. They typically have one or more V8 engines. If they have an exhaust system, it's illegal in the sense that it's equipped with a muffler system bypass. With the flick of a switch, the operator can bypass the muffler system. So rather than the exhaust gases being forced through the muffler and exiting underwater, they just go straight into the atmosphere, either out the transom or through the deck. There are, if you can believe, a few boat manufacturers that ship their boats out of the factory with no muffler system whatsoever. So you ask, why cannot our enforcement agencies do anything about boat noise? Well, the problem is, despite Transport Canada's best efforts over the years to put in place legislation and refine it, the legislation we have now governing boat noise is completely unenforceable. It talks about muffler system design, and should an RCMP officer on the water ticket a boat operator, if it goes to court, the defense counsel simply needs to ask Mr. or Madam RCMP officer, what is your expertise in muffler system design? And of course, they're not expert mechanics, they're not experts on muffler systems, so the case is thrown out. So this is a problem we're facing. Since late last year, I have been speaking with lake organizations in Western Canada, and virtually without exception, they are frustrated by these excessively noisy motorboats. In BC, we've been lucky to have a number of lakes join the Decibel Coalition. So some of them are here, Shawnigan, Cowichan, a number of community and residents associations in the Okanagan, Kalamalka, Shuswap, Mara, Christina, Wassa, Windermere, and more. The problem with the existing federal legislation is that it has no performance standards. So what we're promoting is a decibel limit that can be easily measured and easily enforced. And the decibel limit that we're promoting is 75 decibels. This would be a shoreline measurement with a boat passing approximately 50 to 100 feet away. This is why your RCMP marine patrols are unable to act on boat motor noise complaints. Just a quick overview of Decibel Coalition. Its parent organization is Safe Quiet Lakes. Back in 2011, a group of concerned cottagers in the Muskoka Lakes region of Ontario, that's the go-to cottage area for Toronto residents, decided to get together to deal with the many boating issues they were faced with. During the ensuing 8 years with that solid economic growth, there was a huge proliferation of these excessively noisy, high-performance boats in that area. And they realized that because the legislation is federal, Transport Canada has jurisdiction over all Canadian waterways. In order to deal with the boat noise issue, they needed to have a national organization. So the Decibel Coalition was formed. Now, Transport Canada really, it responds to lobbying, it responds to voices. And the target members that we are seeking to recruit to the Decibel Coalition are lake-oriented property owner groups, community and resident associations, recreation groups, environmental societies, and local governments. These are the voices that Transport Canada will listen to. I should make you aware that the boat manufacturing industry in Canada has a strong lobby, and Transport Canada does listen to them. And this industry association is promoting a tweaking of the existing unenforceable regulations. So we're going to have a fight in our hands. And that is why it is so important to have as many lake organizations and also river and coastal waterway organizations join the Decibel Coalition in order to demonstrate to Transport Canada that a decibel limit law approach is necessary. So that's our challenge, is to gain the support across the country, convince Transport Canada that a decibel limit-based law is the best approach. And our objectives over the next few years are to motivate the federal government to revise the existing legislation to include performance standards for boat mufflers that are set in decibel limits. We are modeling our approach after what's called the Model Noise Act. This model legislation has been adopted by about 30 US states and the EU. It has been proven to be very successful, easy to enforce on the water, and most importantly, it stands up in court. But there's three pieces to the puzzle here if we're going to have success in dealing with these excessively noisy motorboats. Firstly, we have to have the revised performance-based legislation in place. Secondly, the equipment and the training required of, in BC's case, the RCMP Marine Unit officers on the water has to be simple and cost-effective. And finally, there needs to be substantial penalties for vessel owners who fail to comply. This is what we're focused on. The other piece of the puzzle is trying to gain a commitment from the RCMP to have an enforcement program in place coincident with the new legislation. So just a quick recap of where we are. We've got 25 plus organizations joining us now: BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, representing about 30,000 lake users, residences, cottage owners, and their families. And we've started discussions with Transport Canada, and we hope to soon commence our discussions with the BC RCMP Marine Unit. If anybody has connections at a senior level within the BC RCMP Marine Unit, please send them my way. We'd really like to move that forward. Timeline: patience is a virtue. It's going to take 2 to 3 years for this enhanced legislation to be in place. The good news is Transport Canada has begun public dialogue on boat noise emissions, so the time frame could shorten. How can BC LSS and its members assist? Well, there's a number of ways you can assist. Firstly, please encourage your individual lake member groups to join the Decibel Coalition. There's no cost to join or to be a member. We're just simply looking for your support, that you support a decibel-based law to be put in place. Encourage any organizations on your lake, property owners, community groups, stratas, etc., to join Decibel Coalition. The more voices that we can send Transport Canada's way, the stronger will be the support for our approach. Talk to your local RCMP Marine Patrol Unit about the merits of a decibel limit law and ask them to move that up the chain of command. And finally, you may be aware that Transport Canada twice a year has what they call the Canadian Marine Advisory Council. This is where they seek public input on issues. You can, if you submit your agenda item 6 weeks ahead of the meeting date, make a presentation on the particular issue that you wish to speak about. And you can also, if you don't wish to make a presentation, you can register and make comments and ask questions during the session. This is an excellent way to make Transport Canada aware of your concerns. If you'd like to join, if you need more information, please reach out to me. Here's my contact information. And I thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you, and I'm happy to answer questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That's really good information, and I think that's something that we could put in our newsletter as well, promoting the lake groups to join the Decibel Coalition.
Thank
Just
you.
looking at questions here. Not sure if you can answer this. How many Canadian boat manufacturers are there? Seems,
I'm sorry, I don't know.
yeah, seems like it's a US manufacturers that dominate the market, it says. And you are recommending a 75 decibel limit, correct?
Yes, it gets pretty technical very quickly, but there's two forms of measurement. There's a shoreline-based measurement where the vessel is about 50 to 100 feet moving past you. The other measurement is the boat at idle, where you are measuring very close to the boat itself. So in most states where they've adopted the Model Noise Act, if a vessel fails either one of those tests, then the operator needs to deal with the problem.
Okay. Nancy is asking, what would be a representative sound at 75 decibels?
Ooh. At 75 decibels, let's say you're sitting on the beach with your glass of wine in hand and you're having a conversation. The boat is moving at a good clip past you, 50 feet away. You can continue your conversation without a problem. Just an interesting thing about this decibel measurement, every 10 decibel increase amounts to a doubling of the sound impact. So if a boat is at 85 decibels, it's twice as loud as the boat at 75 decibels. So it just increases geometrically. The boats that go past our place, there's, they're running 90 to 100 decibels easily. So that's 4 to 5 times louder than the standard that we're promoting.
Okay, thank you. Nancy's also asking about boat music.
You know, in speaking with all these various lake and river associations in Western Canada, there's 4 issues that everybody talks about. There is boat motor noise, high speed, wakes, and loud music. And they're all issues that everybody is facing. My suggestion is the best way to bring this to Transport Canada's attention is to participate in the CMAQ forum. Transport Canada has complete jurisdiction over all waterways, so that's the only way that you're going to get a regulation in place. Now, one of the earlier speakers talked about voter education, and in reality, certainly in the short term until regulations can be changed, moral suasion, public education is the best way you're going to get some change in behavior. But there's still going to be the outliers that you will not be able to influence.
Right. Okay, do you know when the next CMAQ dates are?
Dates haven't been published, but it will be in the September timeframe. So if you go, if you just do a Google search on Transport Canada, CMAQ, CMAC, and then find the link to register, they will, that puts you on their email list and you'll be notified of upcoming events. That's your best way to stay informed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Shannon McGinty now. She's program coordinator with the Lake Windermere Ambassador. She's going to talk about the management lessons from Lake Windermere.
Thanks, Dawn. All right. Yeah, so as Dawn mentioned, I'm a program coordinator with the Lake Windermere Ambassadors. Quick intro to the Ambassadors. We're a nonprofit water stewardship organization based in Invermere. And so for those who don't know, Invermere is in the southeast corner of the province in the shared traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and Secwepemc peoples, now called the East Kootenays. We're downstream from Columbia Lake, which is at the headwaters of the Columbia River. So I'm going to share some of the unique management approaches we have had the opportunity to be a part of. So starting off with a quick timeline, in 2005 to 2009, the Lake Windermere project formed to collect baseline data about the health of Lake Windermere based on a community survey that demonstrated concern for the rapid development and threats to the lake. So this project led to the formation of the Lake Windermere Ambassadors in 2010. And then at the same time in 2010, the Lake Windermere Management Plan was being created. The Lake Windermere project was able to have some substantial input into that plan. And then the plan was adopted by both local governments in 2011. Since then, the Lake Windermere Ambassadors have served as 2 terms as the Lake Management Committee, with the most recent term expiring this July that we hope to renew for another 5-year term. To present day, we are currently running our programming and operating as the Lake Management Committee. And so now I will expand on what that actually means. So one of the recommendations from the plan was to appoint a community-based lake management committee. The primary role of that committee is to support local government in communicating specifics of the plan and implementing specific non-regulatory recommendations from the plan. Some additional roles are to steward the lake, communicate with the public, so act as a liaison between community and government, and then also provide comment directly to local government regarding development referrals and tenure applications concerning the lake and shoreline areas. In return for filling this role, the ambassadors have received a fee for service from each district that provides guaranteed annual income. This is our current Lake Management Committee. And this came about through prompting from the ambassadors and drivers of the Lake Windermere project to local government, and we were able to come to an agreement that would benefit all parties. A major component of these terms is that the ambassadors board be made up of a diverse group of representatives from the community. That includes local residents, second homeowners, business owners, First Nation, industry representative, all types of recreation and youth. So this diverse representation ensures that the interests of several user groups are being met. Our board also has 4 advisory positions for the 4 governments in our region. So that's the Akiskana First Nation, Shuswap Band, Regional District of East Kootenay, and District of Invermere. So we obviously have been using this role to leverage sort of the health of the lake and our community. So a few examples of these are, 1, the opportunity to provide comment on development applications. This photo is of a Crown Land application for a recreational dock. A recent application that is under review is a 60-slip marina proposal. And so the ambassadors have been able to provide our comment directly to government for them to consider in making their decision. One of the recommendations from the plan is to implement the slow no wake zone in Tayton Bay. So that's what you see in the far distance of that image there. We've also had access to education opportunities. So the district providing permits and materials for the installation of this map that's at the main boat launch in town, and provides information on ideal boating locations and where wake motors are not allowed. And then this one is not directly Lake Management Committee related, as it was under federal jurisdiction, but our voice as the Lake Management Committee when we were talking with the federal government about the marking of this underwater hazard, which is a groin sort of at the north end of Lake Windermere, was very beneficial. The original plan was 13 wooden pile markers, and you can see that these yellow buoys are a little bit more attractive to be looking at. Another major part of this, so in complement to the Lake Windermere Management Plan developed in 2010, is the water surface zoning on Lake Windermere. So both districts were able to complete that, and it was done using data collected through the shoreline habitat inventory mapping that was done on Lake Windermere, which is now called the Foreshore Integrated Management Planning. Which we were also able to redo in 2020 on Lake Windermere in collaboration with Living Lakes Canada. And in talks with this project, we've had some preliminary discussions with the districts about this work and updating their information to use the current data as of last year once it becomes available. And both have shown an interest in doing so. Yeah. So even though this is all lots of great solutions, we do obviously still have challenges. So this model has been beneficial for the ambassadors and stewardship of Lake Windermere. But a few of the major challenges we face are that sometimes the development proposals come to the board with tight timelines, and this limits the committee's ability to have a thorough discussion and gain full understanding of the application before providing their comment, and has in the past limited our ability to comment at all. Communication has been fairly one way, where we don't always hear back on the results of projects, whether they are approved or rejected without further investigation by us. Sometimes our input, well, it is viewed as just commentary and there is no regulatory influence. And so the committee has expressed feelings of being disregarded, and that when our views are in conflict with local government. Well, that's not always the case. It's just a complaint that we've had. And then the board also occasionally loses sight of the long-term impacts and precedents that may be set or cumulative impacts of development. And that's kind of high-level overview of Lake Windermere Ambassador's role as Lake Management Committee. I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you, Shannon. Anybody have a question for Shannon? Okay, we'll have some time at the end as well. We can ask Shannon questions then. Oh, someone wants to know how deep Lake Windermere is.
Yeah, so the deepest point of Lake Windermere is about 6 meters, but the average depth of Lake Windermere is 3 to 4, with some much shallower spots.
Great. Oops. Another question. Oh, can you please restate your concerns over the RDEK?
I'm not quite sure, like our concerns as acting as the Lake Management Committee, is that what you're asking?
Maybe Noel can clarify on that. You said they didn't listen to your concerns.
Yeah, no, not that they don't listen to our concerns. So one of the the responsibilities of being in the Lake Management Committee is providing comments on referrals. So that's things like that community dock or marina applications, any of those sorts of things. The committee in the past has expressed the concern that because our commentary is just that, it's commentary, that either Regional District of East Kootenay or District of Invermere, whoever we're commenting to, may not take our commentary very seriously, based on the fact that it's just commentary. We don't have any specific concerns, or I don't have any specific examples right now.
Jennifer is asking about more information on the no wake zone.
Yeah, I can provide links to the lake management plan that talks about the recommendation of implementing that zone. And then I can also provide my contact information in the chat box if you wanted to ask any specific questions. I think there's lots of things to talk about the zone, so I'm not sure exactly what information you're looking for.
All right. Daryl is asking, how did that marina get a permit?
It's not been permitted. It's currently under review.
Nancy's also asking, can you comment on boat usage on Lake Windermere, the number and type of boats?
For sure, we see lots of boats on Lake Windermere, and lots of kind of the wake boats or boats that are towing water skiers or other recreational users. Numbers, I don't have any numbers. We haven't done any surveys on the boat use in the last few years, so I can't provide an accurate update on
that. Okay. Heather says, great presentation. What regulations are attached to the surface water zoning?
That's a great question. And I will have to look into that to get more information, as we've been having some discussions at our board level about that as well, just with the sort of intersection of water surface versus lake bottom, and different jurisdictions having different say over each. When we look at the actual water surface zoning, it talks a lot about the usage that is available within those regions. So things like overnight mooring or docks or day use, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. There's still a few questions left for you, but I think we'll keep going and we can get to these at the end. Next up, we have Georgia Peck with Living Lakes Canada. She's going to talk about the foreshore integrated management planning.
Thanks, Dawn. And thank you everybody who has presented so far. I'm honored to follow up such a great lineup of speakers. And can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful, thank you. So yeah, we had a really wonderful kind of preview as into the foreshore integrated management plan by Shannon in the previous slide. She mentioned just briefly some of the implementation that can take place after this program. So what I'll do next is rewind and start from the beginning and give everybody a detailed overview of what foreshore integrated management planning is, how it began, where it's come since then, and where we stand today. So first and foremost, my name is Georgia Peck, and I am the newly acting FIMP program manager with Living Lakes Canada. So for anybody who hasn't heard, Living Lakes Canada works to enhance the protection, the restoration, rehabilitation, and the health of watersheds in BC and across Canada. We build capacity through community-based water monitoring to help address climate impacts. We promote and facilitate cross-sector collaboration and research to increase water literacy and support progressive decision-making for improved water stewardship. So I'll start off by saying this program is rich with acronyms. We'll be hearing a lot as I go through the presentation, but I will be sure to introduce each and every one of them as we move forward. Now, my background, which did begin in Southern Ontario, where I am from, is in biology and wildlife conservation. I'm speaking with you today from Golden, BC, where I've been living for the past 3 years. I've just recently joined the Living Lakes Canada team in fall of 2020, and just a couple weeks ago came on board with the FIMP project. So yeah, it's a new project for me, and hopefully I'm able to answer any questions that come forward at the end. Okay, great. So prior to living with Living Lakes, I was acting as the program coordinator with the Lake Windermere Ambassadors while Shannon was on maternity leave, and with Columbia Lake Stewardship Society. So as Shannon mentioned, Lake Windermere was re-FIMPed this past summer in 2020, and I will get into what that means. But I was able to learn about the program from the lake stewardship perspective, which was very helpful now that I am behind the scenes. Okay, great. So before we get much further, diving into acronyms and making things nice and complicated, I will describe FIMP as it stands today. So Foreshore Integrated Management Planning, which has been previously known as SHIM, Sensitive Habitat Inventory and Mapping, is a methodology developed in partnership with Fisheries and Oceans. It maps shoreline habitats, assesses habitat value, and establishes shoreline development guidelines to conserve ecosystems, support climate resiliency, protect species of conservation concern, and provide best management practices to decision makers, stakeholders, and shoreline property owners. So beginning in 2019, Living Lakes Canada entered a 4-year contribution agreement with Fisheries and Oceans Canada and their Canada Nature Fund for Aquatic Species at Risk program. This project is reviewing and revising the FIMP methodology and mapping or remapping, which I'll get into as well, 6 to 8 lakes in the Columbia Basin to assess the rate of change in ecological and urban development parameters. So now that that has been explained, I'll take the next 12 minutes or so to introduce you further to Foreshore Integrated Management Planning. We will discuss the history, the timeline, current accomplishments, and our future vision. So before we dive further into FIMP, I will introduce you to Heather Lee-Scheid and Bruce McDonald, who are on my screen here. Now, Heather is Operations Director with Living Lakes Canada and has been involved with FIMP planning for 17 different lakes in BC and Alberta. Bruce is the retired head of the Habitat Management Program in the Columbia River Basin for Fisheries and Oceans and the project lead for FIMP. He has 37 years of experience with impact assessment of land and water developments of fish habitat. He has initiated and led the implementation of FIMP in the Columbia River Basin and has led many different FIMP projects for lakes in BC, Alberta, and Manitoba. Now, Bruce is most likely who will be receiving any questions that I cannot answer today as well. So some people may or may not be in contact with him in the future. Next slide. Perfect. So as I mentioned, in 2019, Heather and Bruce were successful in securing funds from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And this funding has supported the FIMP program since 2019 and will continue to do so until 2023. This specific 4-year funding has allowed for the surveying of more lakes in the Upper Columbia Basin and an update to the project methodology. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are many different acronyms when we discuss the history and timeline of FIMP. So please feel free to reference this table up in the top right corner as I go through the timeline. So it all started, well, FIMP really is the overarching term, F-I-M-P, that we will use now that the methodology has been updated. However, it all started as SHIM, Sensitive Habitat Inventory Mapping, and that began in 2001. Now, this methodology was developed in the Lower Mainland for the use of surveying streams. The streams in this area provide critical habitat for important fish species like coho salmon. And this method was finalized to survey and inventory these streams. Now, this turned out to be the very foundation of the FIMP program that we use as of today. Now, in 2005, the Regional District of Central Okanagan took SHIM and applied it to a lake for the first time, Okanagan Lake. And this really led the transition from SHIM to FIM, which is foreshore inventory and mapping. And that eventually took place in 2009 when a consultancy based out of Kelowna called Ecoscape wrote the methodology for FIM and published it. So between then and now, the project has continued to be refined and developed to the updated version that we are using today. So as of 2020, the FIMP Mapping and Methods Review is published and in use and to further improve the project. Now it has, the history is really important to understand here because this project has evolved over the past 20 years now that it has been in use that long. It's been used by multiple different researchers and organizations, and it really is a living project that continues to adapt over time. Okay, so the next slide here is going to be a diagram describing the 3 subcomponents of the project. So first we'll begin with foreshore inventory and mapping component, that's FIM. Now the FIM methodology involves a comprehensive survey of the foreshore by boat using GPS and aerial photography assessment. The survey identifies land use such as industrial versus residential versus commercial. It looks at shore type, rocky beach versus sandy beach, riparian conditions, substrate type, presence of wildlife, the number of docks, weirs, or other man-made developments, emergent versus submergent vegetation, and the list goes on. The fieldwork associated with this is very detailed and time-consuming, but very comprehensive as it needs to be. Now, another critical component of FIM includes desktop review. As we all know, each individual lake has a unique history and footprint, and there are so many provincial databases that provide species at risk occurrences, critical habitat layers, and the FIMP team really encourages analysts to include all available data within the data sets. Furthermore, the new FIM protocol has evolved to incorporate First Nation traditional ecological knowledge. So archaeological and cultural values mapping data, including knowledge related to species at risk, is collected and held in confidentiality by the First Nation. And then it is applied for decision making. So the updated methodology looks to include this in the data set whenever it is available. Now, at the end of the FIM component, all of this information gets summarized into a FIM summary report. This is not to get confused with the finalized shoreline guidance document. This is really, the FIM report is really just a rough draft or a rough snapshot of different variables on the lake. Now, following this, we have the Foreshore Habitat Sensitivity Index, and this is really the core analysis of the program. We take data from the FIM component and run it through a quantitative analysis that compresses all those variables into something much more digestible and easy to understand, which looks like a 5-point ecological ranking scale showing low to high habitat sensitivity. Following this, the Foreshore Development Guidance document is published. Now, this is the final report that is used day to day. It is the tangible resource that can be referenced by government, stewardship groups, property owners, anyone who wishes to learn more about the foreshore and the quality of habitat it holds, along with the development guidelines that should accompany it. Okay, great. So now that we have a better understanding of FIMP in its entirety, I'd love to go through the 2019 to 2023 project that we are in funding right now by the Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So I'd like to discuss some of the achievements that occurred in the first year in 2019. So as we mentioned earlier, Bruce and Heather were successful in securing funds from Fisheries and Oceans. And following that, a technical committee was formed to help guide the program. Now, this was followed by 4 days of detailed workshops in Nelson so that this technical committee was fully aware of the scope of the project and where it's going. Additionally, the lake prioritization report, which I will detail in the next slide, and the methodology update were both started. So that field work in 2020 could further practice and refine these methods before both of those new reports were published. Okay, so next up we have 2020, an eventful year for everybody, but it did allow for 4 different lakes to be FIMPed, 2 of which were redone after 10 years to assess landscape level changes that had occurred since the first time these lakes were surveyed. So as Shannon mentioned, that includes Lake Windermere and Lake Moyie. They were redone, and the hope there is that changes seen will encourage updates to existing water zoning and really just highlight the importance of shoreline guidance when it is available. Now, in addition to the lake surveys, the updated methodology was tested and refined, and the lake prioritization report was completed. The primary objective of this report is to determine which lakes in the Upper Columbia Basin will be surveyed in subsequent years of the FIMP program. The criteria used to develop this report included geographic location, stakeholder interest, lake development pressure, and the presence of species at risk, to name a few. And this is where that technical committee came in and really provided their knowledge. So this detailed assessment primarily focused on existing fish and wildlife information, professional judgment, lake development pressure, and the presence of species at risk. So with completed surveys, updated methodology, and soon to be published foreshore guidance documents for the 4 listed lakes, outreach and education was successful in beginning in 2020, and thanks to everybody in attendance today is ongoing. So finally, the data management aspect. The team with FIMP, making these reports accessible and easy to find now and into the future really is of utmost importance. We want them to be accessible by anyone and everyone who wishes to get a hold of them. So all historical and recent FIMP data is currently being uploaded to the Columbia Basin Water Hub, where it will be accessible to be referred to by anybody who wishes to refer to it. Okay, great. So where do we stand today? For me personally, it is reporting season. So we are busy with wrapping up the 2nd year of deliverables and reporting back to funders and stakeholders about the current status of the project. In 2021, 2 to 4 more lakes will be surveyed, and using the lake prioritization report, we are currently narrowing down which lakes will benefit most from the mapping or potential remapping again. And finally, implementation. Over the next 2 years, the FIMP team will work with local and regional government partners to incorporate the shoreline development guidelines into planning initiatives, such as development permit areas, OCP policies and objectives, water surface zoning regulations, as mentioned by Shannon earlier, and overall improving the ability of the guidelines to protect the ecological, cultural, and archaeological sensitivity of shoreline environments with a special focus on conservation zones for habitats of species at risk. So in my opinion, the expansion of this project couldn't have come at a better time. We are hearing more and more that Canadians are leaving densely populated communities, they're leaving big cities, and they're expanding across the country to more rural and natural environments. And while this is a wonderful thing, it also puts a huge amount of pressure on our shoreline habitats. So it is just so important that we get a baseline understanding and a grasp of Canadian habitat quality and continue to provide such great tangible resources to be used now and into the future. So I thank everybody so much for showing an interest in FIMP. It's been wonderful to get to teach you more about the program, and I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Thanks, Georgia.
Thank you.
All right, so Bruce is asking if the FIMP protocols are publicly available.
Yes, the updated methodology is available on Living Lakes Canada website, and I will put the link in the chat box right after this.
Oh, thanks. And Tom is asking which lakes are being surveyed this year.
Yeah, so we haven't made that public yet. Probably the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be informing the lakes themselves, and then we will make a public post to let that knowledge be known.
Great. Anyone else have any questions? Nancy's asking, how is FIMP used by developers? Is it binding?
How it's used by developers, that's a great question. So a lot of the times, similar to what Shannon mentioned, these local stewardship organizations will be referred to when there are development proposals or applications. And based on the habitat ranking, that can really be the deciding factor on whether or not these development applications are approved. So even if local governments think it's a good idea, provincial governments can reference these documents and really back up the science behind their ultimate decision.
Thank you. Okay, we have same question here from Birgit and Rod. How do you choose a lake to be surveyed or studied?
Yeah, absolutely. So all the work that has gone into those lake prioritization reports, one of the main components of that report is a lake candidate list. So a heavily curated list that really emphasizes which lakes need this more. So factors to take into consideration is stakeholder interest, development pressures on that lake. So really lakes that have more development obviously are in need of FIMPing more than others.
Great, thank you. That looks like it might be it for questions for the moment anyway. So I will introduce our next speaker, Captain Mark Fry of Templar Marine Group Limited. He is going to talk about electric boats.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. And a big thank you to Daryl for inviting me to speak today about a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. To see if I can share my screen with you. And Don, you can let me know if it comes up.
Sure. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
All right, so everybody can see this, yeah? Okay, so actually interesting, while I was just looking at this picture and I was listening to Heather speaking about wakes, you can see this is our Cruiser 26. Now all boats obviously are designed to have a point at the front so it can push the water to the side. And you can see the boat that we have here. It's called a semi-displacement hull, which means that it's pointy at the front, but underneath it flattens out at the back. So just even get my cursor here. You can see the tiny little wake that it produces. And by the time it gets about 50 feet out, the wake is dissipated. So this is, now these boats do not go fast. They're not designed to go fast. I could get into the study of hydrodynamics and the fact that water is 900 times denser than air, but that's a discussion for another day for those that want to have it with me. So who are we? We're based in Kelowna, obviously, where boats are manufactured here. We have a number of different models. We have a little Picnic 20, as we call it. And then we have 4 other boats, all designed from the same hull. So to build a fiberglass mold for a boat this size is in or around $500,000. So rather than build multiple hulls from multiple different designs, what we came up with was a series of boats limited only by your imagination in terms of what you want inside the boat, all designed from the same hull. So huge cost savings there. Our 26-footers are approved by Transport Canada. They were built from the ground up to be electric boats. They were not designed to be a boat that you take a big V8 engine out of and then stick one of ours in. So they're designed from the very bottom up and designed to Transport Canada commercial specifications for 12 passengers. Can sustain 33 knots of wind with 60 kilometers and 2-meter waves. You see the different models at the bottom of the screen here, but I'll come to those in a moment. So why go electric? Minimum wake, semi-displacement hull, as I've just demonstrated to you. Alan was talking earlier on about decibels. The motor that we use in our particular boat has a rating of 60 decibels. And 60 decibels is what you're hearing from my voice right now. Over the weekend, a friend of mine had an app for a decibel app on his phone, and we came over for a glass of wine, and the level that we were speaking at was between 40 and 60 decibels. So obviously with electric boats, like electric cars, there's no exhaust fumes, there's no exhaust smoke, there's no fuel burn. Therefore, the recharge rate of charging a boat overnight is give or take 15 cents an hour. So it's fantastic in terms of costs. Electric boats are like electric cars. They can be expensive to buy, but after that, you have no running costs. There's no vibration from them. There's no servicing because you don't have a motor. You don't need oil changes or any of that stuff. An electric motor can run for years and years and years without any work required of it. And there's no winterizing. So there are 6 electric boats currently on Lake Okanagan. And during the winter, we're the only boats out there because everybody else has shrink wrapped their boat and winterized them for the winter. The only thing we have to do to winterize them is to put some antifreeze in the toilet, and that's it. What are they used for? Water taxis. We've had inquiries we had actually an order for 12 water taxis for Victoria to bring passengers from the cruise ship terminal around to the Empress Hotel. But sadly, that was March last year when COVID hit. So that went sideways. It's been put on hold as the cruise ship industry's come to a grinding halt over there. We've had inquiries from Vietnam, Singapore, India, eco-lodges. We've had a lot of inquiries from those, mostly from Africa, and some for the Sunshine Coast in BC. Bird watching, we've had inquiry from 2 different 5-star resorts in India that are bird watching specifically. And anytime they turn on the boats that they have, first of all, it generates noise and it generates fumes and smoke, and the birds all fly away, which doesn't happen with our boats. And sadly, I did take our boat out one day on a demonstration on Okanagan Lake, and there were hundreds of birds on the lake and not one of them flew away. They just swam out of our way. And sadly, I didn't take a video. I wish I had. Research, if those studying, sorry, I missed fishing, obviously, that's an obvious one. Research vessels, flora and fauna, you're not disturbing wildlife. If you need to go close to shore without disturbing anything electric, great for that, doesn't scare the fish away. Whale watching, we've had a lot of inquiries for that, obviously, for all the reasons that we know, and obviously then for family cruising. So why Templar? We can use them year round, as I just mentioned. We have a fully enclosed cabin with isinglass, which opens up in a matter of minutes. And all these windows they're on zippers and Velcro, and they can be just opened up, boats wide open in literally a matter of minutes. As I mentioned, no operating costs. We have a bow thruster as standard equipment. And what that is a small propeller at the front of the boat that pushes the front of the boat to either side. And this boat will turn in almost its own length. So when you're docking, when it's windy, you can use your bow thruster and it'll push you right out the direction that you want to go. So that's standard on our boats. Big difference between our boats and all the other electric boats that are out there is that ours run on 110 volt outlet. If, as you know, with electric cars, you need a special 400 amp plug that are this size, it's massive, you need special chargers. When we just decided to design these boats ourselves, we said, right, to make this work, it has to be able to plug into any marina anywhere in North America, cottage country, wherever you want. So that's what we've done. Our boats have electric flushing toilets. Now that's an interesting one because the Transport Canada came out with a new rule, I want to say about 1.5 years ago, that if you want to drink alcohol on a boat, you have to have 3 things. You have to have a toilet, either a flushing toilet or a porta potty. You have to have a means to cook on board, so barbecue is fine, and you have to have accommodation. So you cannot drink alcohol by law. Sadly, it's not enforced, but that's the way it is, and our boats have those on board deliberately. Multiple USB ports. When we did our research, before we even started to build the boats, we went to a bunch of people, and these boats are designed basically for baby boomers over 50 that, we've owned jet boats, we've been there, done that, got all the t-shirts. So this was specifically for people who just want to go cruising. And one of the things that came up with was the women all wanted a toilet, the men all wanted a fridge for the beer, and the grandkids wanted multiple USB ports and a swimming platform. So that's what we did. Running time, people always ask you, how long will the boat go for? 6 to 8 hours at 5 to 7 knots, which is 9 to 13 kilometers an hour. But again, it depends. The more batteries you put in the boat, the longer, the further you can go. It's really as simple as that. Boat models we have, the Picnic 20, which I'll come to, and these 4 boats all built off the same platform. So this is the little Picnic 20 that we designed. Now this particular one is down in Penticton. If anybody wants to go and try it, then try it out, they can. It's in a marina down there. And this particular model was built for bareboat chartering. So it's for people who want to take their family out for the day. And we didn't put any isinglass on this one. This is just bare bones boat. Dead simple to use. You put it in forward, it'll go 9-10 kilometers. You've got a reverse in it, get you back in the marina. You've got a little swim platform on the back. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's very comfortable for, as you can see, 6 to 8 people. It's Transport Canada approved for 10, but that's a bit of a squash. But 6 to 8 people is all you need for this, and it's absolutely idiot-proof to drive. You bring it back to dock, you plug it back in, and off you go again. This particular model we charge, that's the interior of it, obviously. This particular model, we start out around $59,000, and then it goes up depending on what options you want in it. It's like buying a car. Do you want leather seats? Do you want the fancy woodwork? You know, do you want the larger engine, all that stuff? So it's the same with our boats. We can sell you a base model. Do you want a canvas top? Do you want a fiberglass top? All of these things can be added. This is the first boat that we built, the Cruiser 26, that was in my opening photograph here. And I'll point out a couple of things here. These are what we call our little, this is actually a doorway entrance, which I'll come to in a moment. And this is a sunroof. We've got 2 on the front there. So these are little canvas, they're just zippers, and you open them right up. So it lets lots of air in, lots of light in, lets the sun in, and then all of these windows, all of them will fold up in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes. This is one of the entrances here at the back. And underneath this little swim platform here, we have a swim platform, again, which is required by Transport Canada by law. If somebody falls in the water, they have to be able to get back on the boat from the actual water itself without, so let's say everybody in the boat decides to go swimming and nobody put out a ladder. Well, nobody's getting back on board. So they have to be able to access the ladder from inside the water, which is what we built into this design. This is, you can see about the stern of it open here. Whoops, sorry about that. And there's another one where you can see this actually folds over, and we have another little seat that goes in here, making for a long bench seat at the back. This is what it looks like interior wise. There's the bench seat at the very back I was just talking to you about. There's the entrance that you can also, some docks are higher than others, especially during the winter when the levels drop in the lake. So we can accommodate a much higher access on and off the boat. The forward hatch here is down into the toilet, which I'll show you in the next slide. We have a little fridge here. We have a 4-speaker stereo. We have floor lights in it. It's well equipped, just like any other boat. So, whoops. So there's the forward hatch open down into the forward head. There's the accelerator there. It's just a little plastic. Again, as I said, it's really easy to operate. It's idiot proof. And you can see the 2 of the sunroofs that are open here to let all the light in. Sadly, that's a winter photograph. So this is the forward cabin. So we mirrored the front wall, sorry, to give it a sense of depth and space. And you can sleep 2 people in this. You have your toilet here and the vanity, and the sink, which is what women wanted. Fine. We have this little flap here that actually covers the toilet, so it doesn't look so, makes it look more pleasant. This is a view from where the mirror is looking back, and you can see we have these freestanding tables, various sizes. They're not bolted into the floor, so you can literally lift them off, and if you're not using them, which is great. This is the little flap I was telling you about. It just covers the toilet, so it's not so, it's better. You can actually sit on that as well as a seat. These are the batteries that are installed in the boats. Now, in this particular case, we've got lithium ion, which we're actually moving away from. Lithium ion is now old school as far as batteries are concerned. And we're moving to what's called lithium iron, IRON, lithium iron phosphate, in the middle of the summer, as soon as the batteries are ready to go. Lithium ion is extremely dangerous around water. If a Tesla goes on fire and a fire engine arrives, it takes hundreds of thousands of gallons to put it out, because they just continue, as each cell burns, it ignites the next one, and it goes through. So anyway, I could talk for hours about batteries, but that's a conversation for another day. But just to give you an idea, there's lithium ion, lithium cobalt oxide, lithium iron phosphate, lithium manganese oxide, lithium nickel manganese cobalt oxide, lithium nickel cobalt aluminium oxide, and lithium titanate. And that's before I even get into solid state batteries. So this is the water taxi version I was telling you about. It's kind of a stripped down version of our Cruiser. It doesn't have any walnut finishes in it, no fancy, think of it like just a bus. So it's utilitarian, in fact, just all open seats all around, no isinglass in this particular one. Again, that can be ordered. Just a very simple solution. The starting cost for these things are about 160,000, and again, it goes up depending on what you want in it. This was an interesting concept. We had inquiries from a number of countries in Africa in the Zambezi River Basin for ambulatory care. So the boats could head up the rivers. If somebody gets injured in these outback African villages, it could be a 2-day paddle in a dugout canoe to get to the nearest medical station. So the idea was to bring the medical to the villages. So this was the concept that we came up with, and it has, you can see here, you've got one stretcher and then you've got 2 over here, and it's got lots of little containers for all the medical, excuse me, medical supplies. And I know somebody's going to ask me, well, how do you charge it up in these little villages? There are companies that manufacture, there's one out of New York, Blue Water, I think it's called. They manufacture these floating platforms that are covered in solar panels. And underneath the platform are a series of batteries. So what you can do is you can actually tie these platforms up to trees. You can then have the boat come up alongside it, plug in, and the charge will jump from the batteries overnight into the boat. And to get those platforms to the villages, you actually use the electric boat towed behind to get them there. So it's a concept we work on. We haven't had any orders for them yet. It's still, there's a lot of COVID, as you all know, brought the world to a crashing halt. So we had a year of, what we did was actually start prototyping new designs and concepts, but that's what happened to us. This is the latest model that we're working on. We call this the Sedan. We're very excited about this. We're about 2 days away from finishing the actual naval architectural designs for it. This is obviously for weekend use. As you can see, we wanted to let lots of sunshine in. So this is an electric canvas roof that pulls right back. These are all electric panels, solar panels. The back of it here opens up completely. It has 2 isinglass doors that will open right out and then go into a closet that closes, so you can't even see them. And then we've room back here for, you can put 4 director's chairs, you know, those little canvas ones that you fold up. So we can put 4 back there. So we should have the prototype for this made hopefully by sort of October is what we're aiming for. That's just an aerial view of it. There are 2 places up here where kids like to, in the cruiser, sit on the foredeck and put their feet out through the railing as the boat's going along. Great fun for them. We could also have a couple of mattresses here. You can imagine teenage girls wanting to go out there and sunbathe. That's just another angle of it. Our boats are built with what's called a plumb bow. And that's, so it means that the bow of the boat here is dead straight down in the water, just like the Titanic was. Well, I shouldn't really mention that. The idea here is that you actually have a lot more space in the forepeak sleeping area. So that's why we did that deliberately. And as I said, all 4 of them are designed with the same hull. Interior, obviously, we have an electric cooker here. We have a sink. We have the stairs that will actually, this door here opens up on a hinge so that you can climb out onto the foredeck. We have, again, we'll have removable tables in this. This is what it looks like looking back. And again, these doors, as I said, they all slide completely. So this is completely open to the sunlight, and especially with the sunroof. And these tables we can take on and off. This is from the forward cabin. So what you can't see here is there's a door just about here. And there's a bathroom in there with a full bathroom and full shower, vanity mirror, the whole 9 yards. Plasma TV, obviously. This is 6'6" bed. So it covers all the requirements for Transport Canada. I'm not going to get into all of this, but this is the different models, all the specifications from them. The first 2 boats that we sold here were to people who wanted space for their kids and grandkids, mostly grandkids, and to bring all their friends. And because they're Transport Canada approved for 15 people, that's quite a lot to have out there. It's legal to do so. And everybody can have a glass of wine, and you've got the full bathroom going. We also have, during the winter, we have a little heater in it. Now, sadly, we use heaters on electric cars and electric boats absolutely suck the life out of the batteries. So what we do is we've had to put in a small little diesel heater, but it's called a tier 3 motor, which means that it's no fumes, no exhaust. It's the highest rating you can get for pollution for little motors. But you literally need to put that on for an hour before you go out. We can go and scrape the snow off, put the heater on for an hour, jump in, and then you can turn the heater off because by your body heat generates enough heat to keep it warm. So that's that one. Then the cruiser, the Sedan. Again, we're going to do this in different colors, different models, but we're looking forward to getting this thing in the water. Water taxi, as I said, too much information to go through here at the moment in terms of specifications and everything. But again, this is our Transport Canada approval for 15 people, which we're pleased with. Next one down. So that's really it. I could go on and on about electric boats for quite a long time. Over the 4 years that we've been doing this, we have tried out multiple different motors from multiple different companies. A lot of them are give out false information about their horsepower equivalencies. We're just about to send one motor back to Austria that didn't do what it was supposed to do in terms of performance and stuff. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. One of the big problems with electric boats at the moment is that everybody, or a lot of companies, use proprietary systems. So they have, you can't use different batteries with our motor. So you have to use our batteries. Now, there's a company, I won't say the name, but down in Seattle that does this, and they say you have to use our propulsion system, our motor, our battery pack, and our software, because they all talk to each other. Well, if it breaks down, I can only go to one source to get that battery and that system, and that's that one company. So they can really control the price and the availability of their product. Nobody has yet come up with a generic battery that says you can use this in all boats. It's not there yet. They haven't done it with cars either. They have some of the motorcycle companies, I think Suzuki, Kawasaki, Yamaha, have said they're designing electric motorboats, bikes that can all use the exact same motor. And that's where the industry needs to get to, but I think we're a long way away from it. Canada is becoming more aware of electric boats. I think the world is becoming more aware of electric boats. I was in Austria 2 years ago, and the entire country has gone electric. All of the lakes have to be drinkable water quality. Hamburg, which, believe it or not, has more canals than Amsterdam and Venice, is going electric. Amsterdam itself, obviously, Venice, are all going electric by 2030. So the industry is changing very fast. I think COVID, if any of you saw on TV what happened in Venice when there were no boats running around, is you could actually see fish swimming in the canals in Venice for the first time in I don't know how long. But that's where the world is going. There are electric boats that will do 40 knots. Can you make a wakeboard out of electric? Absolutely. It'll run in about 5 minutes before the batteries die. There are companies that do have boats that will do 40 knots, but for a very short space of time, because the technology is simply not there yet. It's getting there, but it's going to be another while. Whereas this is a semi-displacement hull like ours, can run for 6 or 8 knots without any problems. What else? I guess a little bit about my own background might help. I should have probably started with that. I spent 20 years at sea, most of it in the superyacht industry. And I know a lot of people are going to ask, what's a superyacht? So I'll just show you an example. So you can see this. That's a superyacht. These are the privately owned yachts and owned by corporations, anywhere up to $200 million now at this stage. So I did that, drove those for 15 years. I then started a company, which now Templar is a division of International Yacht Training, which is my other company. And we have over 300 nautical schools in 56 different countries. I've written 40 nautical books, 6 of them are registered in the US Library of Congress. I'm a marine surveyor, and I've designed boats with some of the biggest boat builders in the world, like Bavaria, Catalina Yachts, Newton Boats out of New Orleans. So this is not my first rodeo as far as anything to do with nautical is concerned. No, I think that's about it. Any questions?
Yes, thank you for that. I do have some questions here for you.
Let's see, I'm gonna stop share. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So Gurmeet's asking if you have any plans for a houseboat configuration.
We actually did that a few years ago, but the single biggest problem we have is dockage. Where are we going to put them? It's very easy to do. It's going to fit a houseboat. I mean, you're talking about the Shuswap type houseboats. There's plenty of flat space on the top of those to put solar panels. which would greatly help. But we were looking at, you know, introducing some of them to the Okanagan, but there's just no, they're on the marinas, there's no place to put them.
All right, thank you. Jay is asking, what is the optimal and maximum speeds of your boats?
They tour at 5 knots, which is like 10 kilometers, and maximum speed is about 7 knots, which is about 14 kilometers. Again, the reason we didn't design them to go fast is because other companies are doing that. We looked for a market that was a boat that people could afford, could use all weekend, could use year round, family, friends, kids, and this is what we came up with.
Right. Okay. Do your boats have holding tanks for their toilets?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Rod is asking, how would you recommend recharging your boats for semi-waterfront owners that don't have a plug-in down at the dock?
Yeah, it's really a matter of just running an extension cord down there, or, you know, get an electrician to put them in. Most marinas anywhere in the world will have a 110, sorry, North America will have a 110, 120 socket. And that's deliberately why we designed the motors that we're using for this. Now, interestingly, the motor that we're about to install in this is, and we've been through several years and an awful lot of money switching out different motors. It's called an axial flux electric motor. It's made by a company called MRAX in Slovenia. And it's 8 inches in diameter. And it is 96% efficient. And to put that in context for you, it is used in 9 different aircraft in Europe. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they didn't get approval for air. They wouldn't have aircraft falling out of the sky unless this thing was an absolutely brilliant motor. So that's what we're shifting to at the moment, which is, we're very excited about. It's never been done before. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How long before the batteries need replacing?
Again, that depends on how many times. Batteries are based on a discharge. In other words, how many times do you run them down and then charge them up again? The batteries out there at the moment are getting about 3,000 discharges. So what's 300 days, 350 days a year? So that's what, 5, 6, 7 years. But again, as the technology changes, we've designed the boats in such a way that the batteries that we have in the floor can be lifted out and then just new technologies put in a matter of, you know, an hour or two. So.
All right. What is the draft of your boats?
26 inches, 0.6 of a meter.
Okay. And are the batteries able to be stored for long periods at sub-zero temperatures?
Yes, when we leave them on, obviously all winter long, you know, down at the Monteo Marine and stuff, you can have it can ice out for quite far. We never take them off, so we've never had any issues, to be honest. They do, that's a fair question. They do, like an electric car that goes out in the winter, it loses about 30% of its capacity in cold weather. But that's, again, that's a solution that needs to be found for electric batteries.
All right, thank you. Okay, just before we get to sort of the general question period, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining, and especially to the speakers for coming here today and sharing all this excellent information. So I do have a few questions that came through email as well. So Al is wondering, relating to the issue of noise. He witnessed at Gun Lake where water skiers start at about 7 in the morning. The next day, maybe the group will start at 7:30. So it puts them in direct conflict with other users of the lake that are wanting to enjoy the peace and tranquility of the lake in the morning, like canoeists, paddle boarders. So I was wondering if any panelists care to comment on this.
It's Al and Dawn, thank you.
Oh.
Honestly, I think because there's nothing in the federal regulations concerning time of day with respect to noise and time of day for boating activities, I think the best approach is just try a good neighbor approach with these boaters and just try to persuade them to be respectful of other users of the lake.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on that? Okay. Another question, with wake boats getting bigger and bigger, is it not a possibility to use their weight or displacement as a way to limit their use on smaller lakes? So if these boats are certified by Transport Canada with a maximum passenger load, but he's not sure if that includes how much ballast they can carry. So it seems that displacement is one of the major factors in weight generation. So it would seem to me to be a logical place to look at those limitations.
That's a great suggestion. Hopefully that person will reach out to me and we can connect.
Okay.
Is that's, you know, they're getting bigger, and they're also a contributor to noise because of their sound systems. So there's that too, often, not always.
If I could just jump in there, Dawn, if I may.
Yeah.
The wake boats are designed to create a wake. So yes, having more people will push the boat down further into the water, but they're actually at the front of the boat. They're designed to push resistance. And this is where noise comes from, because you need a big motor. And to put that in perspective for you, last year I bought a Sea Ray for my wife and I to just use as a camper for a few weeks during the summer, and we sold it 3 weeks later. But it had two V8 motors in it, 600 horsepower, and the maximum speed we could get out of it was 41 miles an hour. So in a car, you'd get 180 miles an hour out of it. So that's what I'm talking about, resistance in water, where you've got 900 times the resistance of air. So that's what creates, you need an awful lot of power to push a boat through the water. And obviously power creates noise, it creates pollution. But wakeboards deliberately underneath, if you can see the bottom of the hull, it kind of has like an apex like this that is pushing in to push that water out. And these designers are getting better at pushing more water out, creating bigger waves. It's a whole new hydrodynamic technology.
And that's a very good point. When these boats are getting bigger and more powerful, this is introducing a new level of harm to the lakes. Like that, we've never seen this before, where the sediments could be disturbed so much and at such a depth, 8 meters. I mean, that's almost a little hard to believe, but we've got video that shows it. And as you say, Mark, they're being designed for this purpose, and they're getting bigger. So this is not going away, and we need to work with them to say, hey, here's where you need to go play, and paddlecraft, please respect that that's their play zone, stay in shallow, and hopefully we'll avoid some tragedies and environmental damage as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, there was a question as well about Lake Windermere. So if the maximum depth is 6 meters and the average is 3, clearly there should be no wake boats on the lake. And water protection is trumped by tourism, business, and the Chamber of Commerce. So what can be done?
Actually, I think that's a great question for everybody gathered here. Let's maybe brainstorm that. What do? You've got money versus the aquatic resource.
Anybody want to unmute and join in the conversation?
Obviously, to me, the answer is to ban them. You know, they will just continue to do more and more damage to the shoreline. They will continue to raise more. So there are a lot of lakes. Where was it now? We had an inquiry from a lake in the States, in Washington, and the government was making them go fully electric. And they said they were no longer allowing any motorboats on board the lake at all. So it is starting to happen, but I think to stop all this damage, the only way to do it would be to ban wake boats in shallow waters.
All right, and Nancy commented on the educational aspect as well. Heather, you had those posters that you showed earlier. Can you remind me, those were shareable, weren't they?
Yes, I believe they are being shared by Regional District North Okanagan and probably a couple of other entities around, but you could certainly reach out to them and get connected.
Okay. How does a community or series of communities go about trying to get set restrictions for motorboats with distance, speed, etc. in BC, and can it be enforceable?
Don, it's Alan. I can answer that somewhat. Transport Canada has what they call a vessel operating restriction regulation. So essentially, it's an override to the existing legislation for a specific geographic area. There's quite a long process required, consultation, that sort of thing, to get a VORR. But it is one tactic that a neighborhood could use to try and put certain restrictions on boating for their area.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we really touched on this, but what measures are being taken to require the houseboat industry to collect gray water on board and dispose of it on shore along with the black water?
I can answer that. I was involved in that a few years back, about 2012. There was a moratorium on Shuswap Lake at the time for development and for sewage release. And at the same time, they did a gray water assessment of the system, the Ministry of Environment at the time, and required all houseboats to contain their black water and to implement containment of gray water within a period of time. So I believe they all have to have full gray water containment as of 2014. Terry, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong because she's involved. Terry Ridley's on, I saw. And I think that has been implemented, at least on the Shuswap, where there is a, the science and the regulations behind it. I don't know if there's many other lakes that actually have the same houseboat industry that the Shuswap does. Don't have the marinas, not the state.
Okay, this goes back to your presentation, Daryl. Are there any criteria for lakes like Columbia Lake that have very steep shores, and in particular railway tracks running along the lake? Like, does CP Rail have to abide by similar criteria to what you discussed in your presentation?
That's an easy answer. No, there aren't. For a federal company like CP Rail, the only thing they really have to follow is the Federal Fisheries Act. So they can't destroy fish habitat through their infrastructure. So in other words, eroding shorelines or use of riprap. They still have to get approvals through DFO and Water Act approvals on the freshwater systems for the Section 11. But really, no. I mean, really, their mandate is keep their trains are running, and to do that, they have to use these old practices. But I believe there are people that work there that are starting to integrate other ideas, right? To say, okay, we can do more than just put rocks on the shoreline and something that's going to fail in the long run. They might be looking at what sustainability and built into this. So if you have something, I think, and for many years, the ministry in BC, for example, has not allowed you to put materials into the lake. So to nourish your beaches back, or put gravels down, or create something that's been, if it's been washed away, that's it. Too bad, it's gone, right? You can't put it back in. But I think the ideas that are coming out of Seattle and other places like that, where you beach nourishment and replenishment and restoration is part of it, right? You can put back in and restore it, get those grades back. So I'm hoping that education will keep moving forward through all the organizations such as CP Rail and Transport Canada and others. Well, Transport Canada doesn't have a lot to do with this other than the safety of the rail lines. But yeah, I hope it moves forward. Good question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Alan, what was the name of the department for getting restrictions on a lake?
Best Google Transport Canada VORR. And that will be a good starting point for what the process is.
Okay, so Shauna put the link in the chat box there. It's a link to the Boating Safety Canada to obtain a VORR. So there is a link in there. Okay, any more questions?
There was a question from Jennifer. Miles, it had to do with green shores and ocean front and lakefront.
Right, so they do freshwater lakes now, correct? Not just oceanfront.
Yeah, it's the program's moving that way because there's more and more demand, more and more people that are interested. It certainly started as an ocean component, but it's been active on Lake Washington and other places in Washington State, just south of us. So it's being transferred over to, and that's where the Green Shores for Homes component comes in, is about, you know, doesn't matter where you live, if you want to have your lakeshore protected and greened up, and the program's there for you. They're creating a new, I'd encourage you to go onto Stewardship BC website to take a look at the Stewardship Center, I should say. And they are creating additional programs for certifications that train people to do the green shores.
Right. And you can take the certification, like the level 1 through BCIT, I think, and another.
That's right.
Yeah.
Level 2, I got level 2, and they're going to be doing another training one shortly. Once you can travel again.
Right, of course, yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there anyone's question that I missed in the chat box? Please speak up and let me know, or if there's any other questions. This has been recorded, so we will share it afterwards.
And it is meant as a forum, so if anybody has any other discussion points, and look at all the information that Heather brought forward and how interesting it really is, and how we could utilize that on other lake systems. Many of the lakes in BC are quite shallow, and if not shallow, around the perimeter, one arm of the lake is usually quite shallow. Look at Charlie Lake or Green Lake or Dunn Lake. I mean, they're all of them. Even Salmon Arm. Look at Shuswap Lake, the Salmon Arm Bay. Perhaps there's certain areas where those restrictions, that science can be brought forward as an argument to those municipalities and for that and to Transport Canada for specific areas of certain lakes. Like I think Heather, you came up with that at 8 meters, but again, that's does that cover a large band of the shoreline, or is it smaller segments?
It depends on the bathymetry of a lake, how much distance from shore that would be. You know, if it's a sheer cliff going down into the lake, obviously it would be very little distance from shore. Whereas in a shallow arm, like you're saying, it would probably restrict it quite a bit. So there is a whole video that people can ask from BCLSS that shows a lot more of what I was able to cover today. And there's also a nice boring report that goes along with it that you can also ask for. But our purpose was to get some science behind sediment disturbance, like that big piece. And we only make passing mention of very important other issues such as sound and environmental damage and public safety. But they're all part of the same issue, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to learn to get along with it. I thought this would be a fad. It looks, you know, I'm going to offend somebody, but it looks boring to me. But anyways, obviously not so much.
Okay, thank you.
So another question coming on.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here for a minute? This is kind of a funny question. It's a do you know question. I am here as a member of the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society, and I'd like to thank you for putting together a forum like this. It's very informative and makes me feel energated. Yeah, energated. Okay. And I'd like to mention that the issue that brought the my stewardship society together was boat noise. And I am so pleased that finally we are having some action from the Canada Decibel Coalition, and that Alan is working so hard. And I just would like to mention, he gave me a good news item by email the other day. Alan is contacting local governments, and he actually has a meeting to attend with the Cowichan Valley Regional District in May. So a really good step towards getting local governance on board on this issue. And I think this is the only way, because I think somebody earlier, I think it might have been Heather, mentioned that one of our big problems is self-entitlement. We have people out on the lake who feel entitled to break the law because nothing is being done. And I am really hoping that we're going to see something coming out of this. And so I don't know if anybody has an answer to this, but my question is, did you know? And thank you very much.
Anybody have anything to add?
I'd like to just add something quick. I'm Kelly Garcia. I'm with the Okanagan Basin Water Board. And I just wanted to say that Heather mentioned in her presentation that we're working on a source protection toolkit. What she failed to mention is that she's the principal author of that toolkit. So it's going to be very good. Her and I have been working on it for at least a year now. It is targeted to local governments, but there still will be a lot of great information in there. It'll have its own website. So we're creating a PDF toolkit, but we're also creating an interactive website for that. So I'll make sure to send the link to the BC LSS when it goes out, and maybe you can include it in your newsletter or something.
That would be great. Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Daryl, you looked excited about that.
I am. It's going to be so great to have those tools to just share them out too. We have other ways to share them so that more people can find, because I know people that have big homes along the lake shore, and yes, sure, they're a bit entitled, right? They have $3 to $5 million homes on Okanagan Lake, but they shake their fists at the power boaters going by. They don't like those noises out in the middle of the lake, the cigar boats racing up and down, and they get called, not such pleasant names. And there's some powerful people that can be part of part of the solution that should be somehow we need to reach out to the people and let them know that, you matter. You guys have boats, you're all voters, but you also care, right? So yeah, this type of toolkit is going to be fantastic for that. And there was a question on there about, I think, I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Ainer Kersey?
Yeah.
Can log booms be used in the lake to help with wakes? Well, that's a really good question, and it's very dependent on the areas. I do a lot of work on impact assessments for marinas, where you have to model the impacts from the marina on the shoreline processes, on water circulation, water quality, and sediment transport systems along the shoreline. As soon as you start putting log booms into the lakes, you're maybe solving one thing but creating another problem. So it's not quite that simple, but every solution that is brought up just needs to be evaluated in all of its different implications on the environment.
All right. Looks like Bruce has a good suggestion too. Bruce is one of our directors. He's at Charlie Lake, and he thought other topics of interest could be algae blooms and aquatic plant monitoring and management. Maybe that's something we can consider for another forum in the future. Oh, and Kelly mentions that they're creating webinars for each of the source protection tools in the toolkit. Okay, and there are more and more people wanting to enjoy quiet waters for paddling, bird watching, etc. That point needs to be made to local governance bodies. Anyone have a comment on that?
Yes, it's Alan. Excuse me. A really great comment. And, you know, it's all about getting the message to Transport Canada. And so recruiting lake organizations, and now we're focused on local municipal governments. So whether that be a village, a town, a regional district, if they sign on to the Decibel Coalition and indicate that they are in favor of a decibel limit-based law for boat motor noise, that will send a very strong message to Transport Canada. So if you're in an area, we don't have any local governments who've actually signed on at this point. We're just really at the start of our recruiting process for municipal governments. But if you have a local government in your area that you would like to have a presentation done by the Decibel Coalition, please connect with me and I will be happy to do that. Those voices will carry much weight with Transport Canada.
Thank
If I can
you.
make a comment.
Yes.
I feel like we're at the same stage that the non-smoking lobby was at years and years ago, when everyone said, oh, you could never ban smoking in bars because everybody in bars smokes. But, you know, one smoke in a room destroys the air quality for everyone. And that's how it is with these wake boats, or any loud boats, is one person's pleasure is impacting everybody else's enjoyment of the lake in terms of peace and quiet, or just wanting to paddle your canoe or your paddleboard, or sail. We have a sailboat on Lake Windermere, and we could sail when there's very little wind until the motorboats get out and shake the wind out of our sails. So I mean, I think we're at that same place, is that I think it's a quiet silent majority of people who actually prefer lakes for every other quality than wake boating. So it's a very small number of people who are allowed to destroy it for everyone. And now that we know the science behind what wake boats do, I mean, they shouldn't be allowed at all on our lake, which is a very shallow lake. I know it's going to be an uphill battle, but why? How can we let a few people destroy the lake? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. This was a super informative workshop. Thank you to all the speakers.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, it's Ken here on Alta Lake and Whistler, and I feel for everybody with their wake boats on the lakes, because I know exactly what kind of damage they cause. But on Alta Lake, we got a little different problem here. And I'd like to get Alan actually in contact with the resort municipality of Whistler, because what we have is our lake is only 2 kilometers long, and we have all these party barges on there, which have these 10 horsepower motors. And now they're not, super loud, but when you get 10 of them out there, it's like a lawnmower going all day long. Your neighbor mowing his lawn all day long, so you have no peace at all. And the municipality went and did a survey, and they're talking about bringing on electric motors. But anyways, that's kind of where we're at right now. But it's a major problem. As I say, we've got about 60 of these party barges on the lake, and of course you get everybody drinking and the music as well too. So it really, you really can't enjoy a lake on a nice day at all. And plus, we're a paddle lake and a sailing lake too. That's what we are. So that's my comment.
Don, it's Alan. The gentleman's comments reflect the words that I've heard from a number of lakes and organizations. And in Eastern BC, a regional district had severe problems of boats rafting in the middle of the lake, and it just created a lot of noise, music, yelling, drinking, etc. And I think the best solution for the Alta Lake problem is to step up RCMP enforcement. If there's drinking, they're going to deal with that very, very quickly, and that's going to tend to quell this problem, I think, rather quickly. One thing I learned in the process of talking with various organizations was that If the RCMP enforcement is not very often in your particular lake, your local government, if it wishes to put some money up, can work with the RCMP to increase the surveillance. So it's all about dollars, but it is possible.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Daryl, this might be another question for you. Jennifer's learned about a few resources now available to the Okanagan, but now her problem is which is best for her area, Green Shores or Lovejoy Lake?
Hi, Jennifer. Yeah, that's a great question. They're two very different things. I would definitely implement Lovejoy Lake for overall mapping of the shorelines. It's similar to FEM, but not. It's more about looking at each individual property. So Lovejoy Lakes hires their team to go around the lake and then look at each property to do a property report. And then they let the owners know that the property report is done. And then they can then ask for that property report. And when you get it, it'll tell them, okay, you've got retaining walls, you've got roof drains, you've got boat launches, you got all these things that are impacting the lake. Here's what you could do about it. Examples. Now, Green Shores is actually a program where you're certified to actually go in and make those changes. So if Lovejoy Lakes identifies the problems, Green Shores provides the solutions to the problem. That should answer your question. Doing both.
Thank you. All right, does anybody have any other questions or comments? You're welcome to type them in the chat or unmute and let us know.
I have another little hint. I worked on a development on Shuswap Lake. It's called Cottonwood Cove Resort near the mouth of Adams River. And you can often implement boat protection through design. So a 10-acre lagoon that somebody dredged out of the land was mandated to connect to the lake as part of the project development. When as the project biologist, I suggested that they would have water quality impacts if they allowed boats into their interior lagoons. So they created a marina at the mouth in an appropriate location that would stop powerboats from going inside. And they put up signs, no powerboats, and they put in a kayak and canoe rental facility inside the lagoon, and it's just taken off. It's done very well. People are constantly renting those as they come to, or buying their own and going. And like you said, there's more and more people paddling, but you have to create that opportunity for them. You have to create those places where they can go rent their facilities, or a kayak only launch or a canoeing launch. You're still going to have power boaters. I have my fishing boat, my 17.5-foot fishing boat, which hardly creates any wake, gets me places fast, and I can't pull a skier behind it, but I'm a boater, so I understand there's times you don't want to get there in place fast, and you want to follow the regulations, right? You can't be within 30 meters. You can't go faster than, is it 5 knots, or within 30 meters of the shore. So follow those regulations. We can reduce impacts, let people know.
All right, thank you. Okay, it doesn't seem that we have any more questions or comments, and it's coming up to noon here Pacific time. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining, and thanks again to all the speakers for all that excellent information. And we will make the recording and all the other resources available to everyone soon. All right, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
See you
so
later.
much. Very, very good presentations.
Thank you.
Enjoyable.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to put that screen on, Bruce, on mine. I love that.
I'll send
Hi,
you the.
Linnea.
Okay. Nice dog. We got our golden doodle into the spa or the groomers yesterday, and she came back looking like a completely different dog. Just like, that's not my dog. It's like fluffy, poof, there's afros. You can see her eyes. Yeah.
John,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask if you could, when you send out kind of your follow-up, if you could share the presenter's contact information as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I sent mine directly to the folks that had questions that I didn't address, but I think probably people would appreciate that.
Yeah, no, good idea. I wrote that down, and
Oh, awesome.
big star by it. I have lots to remember. Hope
I know, yeah.
remember everything.
Let me know if you need any help with anything. I can
Yeah, maybe
do what I
I'll run
can.
it by you before I send it to everyone. I'll yeah, I'll send it to you to make sure everything's there.
Sure.
Excellent job of organizing, Dawn. You did an awesome job. This was a great presentation. Great presentations, plural.
Thanks to the committee for all your work on this, and for Living Lakes Canada and Lake Windermere Ambassadors, and Shannon for coaching me through all the technical stuff, because it's terrifying. So, but I think it went fine. I almost didn't record from the beginning because it was on pause, but whew. Yeah.
No, this is a great way. I think I saw what 69 people or 59, 69 people all told. So I think we had a pretty good turnout, and you know, this tells me that we as BCLSS, this is going to be a good way to reach people. You know, we don't have to go through a facility and the caterers and on and on and on. I think this is great.
Yeah. That was a good turnout, I think.
And it turned out to be a good time scale too. You know,
yeah,
2.5 hours was plenty.
Yeah.
You know, we lost most people at the end there, but we had 65 for the most part, and then we went down to 45 for question period. And that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I was riveted in my seat here with all of these great talks. and to have the electric boating one at the end, I mean, I was waiting for that because I knew very little about electric boats. So I was glued to Mark's presentation there at the end. So that certainly didn't, I wasn't falling asleep, you know, with all of these good presentations.
Jim, are you still there? Not sure if you can hear. I had a news reporter contact me about Jim's article on wake boats. So I'm going to send the contact information along. Actually, the reporter was on the call today. So that could be good as well. And it looks like I have some follow-up questions in my email already, so I'll have to send those out to everyone.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Go have
Bye
some
now.
lunch. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.